Today on the DIY Designer, we are upcycling a men's button-down into this. Guys, welcome to my channel. Man, I am glad that you're here today. This video is so good and I'm so stoked to share it with you. So today we are doing like the ultimate men's shirt upcycle. I'm gonna show you how to take a classic button-down shirt that you can either find at the thrift store or maybe a shirt that the men in your life are no longer wearing and transform it into this frilly, feminine, fabulous, flowy little frock that you are going to be in love with. Now, this whole project originally came to be because I really wanted to recreate the Rhode Rainbow Dress. Have you guys seen this dress? I just love it. I've had it screenshot in my phone forever, but I didn't really know how to make it because it's got all these gourds. Gourds are basically like triangles of fabric that can get sewn in to the skirt of a dress or a skirt themselves to create a lot more volume. Now, gourds can kind of be hard to sew if you're not like an expert sewer. I'm a pretty good sewer and even for me, they're really intimidating. So I have a really cool hack for how you guys can actually create all the volume of a gourd, but in not the exact proper technique, but as you can see, it totally works. One thing I just want to show you is a few of the other options just for inspo for you. So you can see all of these Rhode dresses. This is the exact same cut and body. Some of them are the same prints so that it's just this sort of flirty skirt within a basic crisp shirt dress. And some of them are color blocked, right? So there's a lot of different versions you can do. And if you don't want to use a men's shirt, you can grab a dress that's hanging in your closet that's just like a simple straight dress, and you can do this to that dress. I'm going to be using horsehair trim for the bottom to not only clean finish the bottom of my dress, but also give me a few more inches of length and create all of this curly volume. And it's like an accordion. It's like boing, boing. It's really, really fun and it feels amazing on. The ultimate men's shirt upcycle. Let's do it. So I was lucky enough to find two identical shirts at the thrift store. It's like a Joseph A. Bank button-down shirt, small, $7 each, so I bought both. Now what I decided to do was actually cut them so that I could have a longer skirt. I put on one of the shirts and pinned where I wanted my waist, and now I'm cutting it basically about an inch longer than that, so I'll have seam allowance. Once the shirt part is done, I'm gonna grab my second one, and for now I'm just cutting as much length as possible. So I'm basically cutting right underneath the underarm. You can always fold in half in order to cut evenly when you're doing something like this. So there we go. I've got my shirt and I've got my skirt. Now, because I cut it so high, the pocket was still visible on what is going to be my skirt. So I'm just simply trimming it off. Use a seam ripper. I just was too lazy to go get mine. Okay, so this is basically where we're at. We've got the shirt and the skirt. They will eventually connect, but I'm going to be adding the gourds into the skirt before I actually do that. Now I realized for whatever reason, the first snip that I did, my camera wasn't rolling, but basically all I did was cut as close to the button placket on the right and left side of the shirt. So as you remember, I was originally gonna do the rainbow version of this dress and then end up changing it to an all white version. But basically what I'm doing here is I'm measuring how far apart I want my gourds. I decided about 2 inches apart was right because I had 10 pieces on the front and 10 on the back that I wanted to cut. For my center back, I just cut it in the center, but the rest of them I'm cutting together, front and back at the same time. What you can see is that I'm alternating heights. So for my center, front, and back, that's the tallest piece. Then I go down a few inches, then the next one I go up an inch, then down an inch, just to create a little bit of dimension. And you can see one side is done. Now, I folded it over really only to mark the height of each one. So I put a pin on each place, knowing the height so that it would obviously be the same on the right and the left. But then I went ahead and took my measuring tape, measured 2 inches apart, and pinned them the way I did my first. And there you go. You can see I've got my openings. Now, when I was originally going to do my gourds, like the traditional way, I needed to measure each and every triangle, and I figured I was gonna need to make a pattern for each and every piece. I got overwhelmed and was like, no. I'm gonna come up with a hack for this because this is gonna drive me insane. And that's what the hack is right now. So step one, you're gonna take your fabric and you're basically gonna be folding over the edges and pressing them so that when you sew them, they're gonna be nice and clean, finished and crisp. So flip your skirt upside down, fold over all of your edges, I don't know, maybe like a 1/4 inch. You don't wanna get rid of too much fabric, just enough so that it's clean finished. Now you're gonna take it, you're gonna grab your fabric, you are going to open up your very first piece, however wide you want them. The original ones I made about 15 inches wide, and I make them a little smaller later. But you're going to lay it directly on the fabric. With the fold that you've done by pressing it, you're going to pin it folded down. You're going to make sure everything is laying flat, and you're basically creating custom pieces by pinning it directly to the fabric on its hole. We're gonna top stitch this instead of the traditional way that you sew in a gourd. We're gonna top stitch it. It's gonna make it so much easier. And as you can see, I actually am doing like 2 at a time. So I did my one gourd, then I just sliced open my second piece and pinned it at the same time. For my very first one, I was sewing it while it was still attached to all of the fabric, and I end up changing that and cutting it, which you'll see in a minute. But basically you can see I'm pulling it nice and flat, nice and tight, and because I pressed all of my edges, it's top stitching, keeping it clean. Now when you get up to the very corner, this is the only part you really want to make sure to be careful with, because you want them to look like they're set in perfectly. So just make sure that you leave your needle in, rotate your fabric all the way around so it's a crisp angle. And now I'm basically cutting the gourds away from the rest of my fabric, separating it from the rest of my fabric. And here you go. I ended up with, this was my tester to see if it even worked, and I was like, yeah, man, this is working. This is so much easier than making all these individual patterns and face to face and flipping it up and turning it around and all of that stuff. So this is a really cool hack. Now, what I realized as I went on was it was easier to pin it onto the fabric and then cut it right then and there and release it from the fabric, so that when you're sewing it, you're only sewing, you're not dealing with like the bulk of the fabric. So again, you can see I'm pinning it down with the little fold that I ironed, and now I'm cutting it, kind of rough cutting it, we'll clean it up later, away from the fabric. Now I go in and I was basically doing 3 panels at a time. So I would pin 3 panels, cut away 3 panels, sew 3 panels, and then move on to the next one. And again, this very top corner, this is where you want to be really careful to make sure that it's nice and crisp. Leave that needle in, rotate it around, and go back down. Once you are done and you've sewn the entire thing in, the skirt is done, and you'll see how we attach it in just a minute. Now, as I was working my way around towards the back, I started making the gourds a little bit more narrow, not quite as full. I actually wish I hadn't done that. I wish I had just left that full, voluminous, like path I was on, because the back doesn't have quite as much of a curly detail as the front does, and that's because I started adjusting them. So here you go. You can see the entire skirt is done. All of the gourds are sewn in, and now it's time to attach it to the top of the shirt. So to do that, you're gonna lay it face to face, and you can see obviously it's going up towards the shirt. That's because I'm gonna pin it first, button placket to button placket, pin it so it's nice and even. Then move over to your side seam, then move over to your back, and just add as many pins as you need. Now, when you're sewing it together, I gave myself about 1 inch of seam allowance, and I'm pulling because the bottom felt a little bigger than the top. So I'm just pulling it so that it creates a slight gather. Now that everything is attached, I'm gonna clean it up, because remember, when I cut them, I was rough cutting them just to release them from the fabric. These weren't set pattern pieces. This was happening on the fly. So what you're gonna do now is iron everything so it really fuses it together, and go back in with your fabric scissors and cut them really close to the edge. You can use an overlock on the edges if you want, but just cutting them clean and making less excess is really important. Now, here's the situation. The skirt's all different lengths right now because the shirt is all different lengths and the gourds are all different lengths. So I wanted to even it up. So what I'm doing is I'm picking the shortest point, which is on the side. On a men's shirt, it kind of comes up on the side. I saw how long can I possibly make it. That was 14 inches from the waist. So what I'm doing now is I'm marking 14 inches on a panel of the men's shirt, then 14 inches on the center of a gourd, 14 inches on the panel of a men's shirt, 14 inches on the center of the gourd. And I'm pinning it. Once I get towards the back of my dress, I elongate it to about 15, then to 16, then I go back up to 15 and merge back in with my 14s, right? So I just made the back a little longer. And now I am just cutting it following my pins. Now, a great tip for when you're cutting something like this, you don't need to do chalk and connect your lines. All you need to do is look where you're going. Don't look at where your scissors are. Look at the next pin, and your eye will naturally take you there. So all I'm doing is looking at the pin ahead of me, and my scissors are naturally cutting a perfectly sloped curve connecting from line to line to line. You're gonna do that across the entire thing. And then I realized, okay, I need a little bit of extra length and I want some detail on the bottom. I went to Joann's to see if they had horsehair, and they did. And they had the wide stuff, which is really what I wanted. I think this is either, what is that? Maybe 2 inches wide about, which was exactly what I wanted. I needed 6 yards because of all the gourds. So I was, in case they didn't have enough, I was looking at my other options. And you can see there's actually quite a few options if you do want to give it like a trim. A lot of options. Just bring your shirt with you so that you can match it. Now here's all of my horsehair. I didn't know how I was gonna sew it. I've never done this before. So I kind of like sat there and I looked at it, and what I decided to do was clean finish the edge of my skirt by zigzagging it. I didn't want to make it any shorter because again, I was already a little short. So I zigzagged the entire edge, and now I grabbed my horsehair trim, I lined it up with the edge of my skirt. You see it there? See it on my hand? It's lining up with the edge. I'm doing a very small seam allowance. It's basically a 1/4 inch seam allowance, attaching the horsehair to the edge of my skirt. Once this is sewn all the way around, I flip it down just like that, and you can see it folds down. The seam is hidden on the inside of the skirt now. So this part where you're pressing it is really important. You want to grab the horsehair and kind of tug on it so that it creates a really crisp hem on the bottom, right? We had it face to face, so then I folded it down, which would create like a bubbly hem. I want it to stay flat, so I'm pressing it triangle by triangle. Now, do you see how the horsehair is kind of like bent in a weird way? That's because it was on the spool for however long it was on the spool, and it kind of formed to that. So you want to iron it, but you want to make sure to use a protective cloth so that it doesn't melt it, and use kind of a medium heat. You're just gonna iron it section by section, pulling the hem as you go, and then we are done. All right, guys, that's it. I'm gonna go model this dress for you. I can't wait for you to see the movement. It is so, so, so cool. If you guys have any questions, don't hesitate to comment them down below. You know, I'm all up in those comments. And if you guys liked this video, I hope that you'll hit the like button and subscribe if you're new. You have no idea how much that helps the channel grow when you're telling YouTube that this was good content. It really does go a long way in letting them know that I'm creating great content over here. So thank you for being here. Thanks for watching. And I'll see you guys next week. Enjoy the fashion show.